If you've ever opened Cash App and noticed something called borrow, you probably had the same reaction most people have at first. Wait, I can actually borrow money from this app? And then the next question hits immediately. How much can I borrow? Why is my limit so low? And how do people get access to $20, $100, $200, or even $500 or more? So let's break this down in a simple, real way, like you're hearing it from someone who has actually seen how it works and understands why Cash App does what it does behind the scenes. Cash App Borrow is basically a short-term loan feature inside the app that lets eligible users take a small amount of money instantly and pay it back later with a small fee. It's not available to everyone, and that's the first thing most people get confused about. You might have two friends using Cash App, and one sees borrow and the other doesn't see it at all. That's because Cash App doesn't just give it to everyone automatically. It's selective, based on internal eligibility checks. Now, when people talk about borrow limits, they're usually referring to how much Cash App is willing to let you borrow at one time. And that range usually starts around $20 and can go up to $200 for most users, while some eligible users may see limits up to $250, $300, $400, and in rare cases around $500 or more. But that higher end is not common, and it doesn't happen just because you request it. It's not like a slider you control. It's something Cash App decides for you. So what actually determines your borrow limit? Cash App doesn't publicly reveal every detail of their system, but based on how the feature behaves, your limit is mostly based on your activity inside the app. That includes how long your account has been active, how often you use Cash App, whether you receive regular deposits, your repayment behavior if you borrowed before, and your general account reliability. Think of it like this. Cash App is trying to decide if you're someone who will reliably pay back a small loan. So if you've had your account for a while, you use it consistently, and you don't have suspicious activity, you're more likely to see a higher borrow limit over time. But if your account is new or inactive, you might not see borrow at all. Now let's talk about the most important part people care about. How do limits actually work in real life? When borrow is available to you, you don't get to choose any amount you want. Instead, Cash App gives you a fixed range. For example, you might open borrow and see something like, you can borrow $50 or you can borrow up to $100. In some cases, you might see multiple options depending on your eligibility tier. But again, this is controlled by Cash App. And here's something people don't always understand. Your limit is not permanent. It can change. It can go up or down depending on your usage. If you borrow money and pay it back on time, Cash App may gradually increase your limit. If you borrow and delay payments or fail to repay on time, your limit might stay the same or even disappear completely. So it's not just about getting access once, it's about building trust with the system over time. Now let's go deeper into why the range is usually between $20 and $500. Cash App Borrow is designed as a microloan system, not a full personal loan service. That means it's meant for small, short-term needs, like covering a bill before payday, handling an emergency expense, or filling a temporary gap in your balance. Because of that, the limits are intentionally kept relatively low compared to traditional banks or loan apps. The $20 to $200 range is the most common because it represents low-risk lending. Cash App can safely offer that amount to a large number of users without exposing itself to high default risk. Once a user proves reliability, the system may extend higher limits, which is why some people see $300, $400, or even $500. But even at $500, it's still not a large loan in financial terms. It's still meant to be short-term and quickly repaid. Now, a big question people ask is, why don't I see borrow at all? This is actually very normal. Not everyone gets access. Cash App rolls out borrow gradually and selectively. If your account doesn't meet internal criteria, the feature simply won't appear. There is no manual way to request it, no button to apply, and no customer service trick to unlock it. However, accounts that typically get access share some common patterns. They tend to be older accounts, meaning they've been active for months or years. They usually have regular transactions going in and out. They may receive direct deposits like salary or consistent transfers. And importantly, they don't have a history of chargebacks, disputes, or account issues. Cash App is basically trying to reduce risk, so the more stable your account looks, the more likely you are to see borrow and potentially a higher limit. Now let's talk about how repayment affects your limit, because this is where most people either build their limit or lose access. When you borrow money, Cash App gives you a repayment date. You usually have a short window to pay it back, often within a few weeks. If you pay it back on time, that's a positive signal. It tells the system you're reliable. Over time, that can increase your limit. But if you miss payments, even once, it can reduce your chances of getting a higher limit in the future. In some cases, it may even remove borrow from your account completely. That's why people who treat it casually often end up stuck at low limits or lose access entirely. Another thing that affects your borrow limit is how frequently you use Cash App overall. If you only open the app once in a while, the system doesn't have enough data on your behaviour. But if you use it regularly, send money, receive money, and keep your account active, Cash App gets a clearer picture of your reliability. Now, let's address something important that many people misunderstand. Increasing your borrow limit is not something you can force. There is no button, no hack, and no shortcut. If someone tells you they can unlock $500 instantly, that's not how the system works. Cash App uses internal algorithms to evaluate risk, and those decisions are automatic. What you can do, however, is improve your eligibility over time. That means keeping your account active, maintaining consistent transactions, and repaying any borrowed amount on time. Those are the real factors that influence your limit. Another interesting thing is that even if two people have the same account age, their borrow limits can still be completely different. One person might see $100 while another sees $300. That's because Cash App looks at behaviour patterns, not just basic account information. It's not one size fits all. Now imagine your borrow limit like a trust score inside Cash App. The more responsible your behaviour, the more trust you build. And the more trust you build, the more access you get over time. Some users also notice that their limit changes without them doing anything. That's normal too. Cash App periodically updates eligibility in the background. So your limit can increase even if you didn't request anything, or decrease if your account activity changes. At the higher end, when people reach around $400 to $500, it's usually because they've been long-term users with very consistent behaviour. They've likely borrowed and repaid multiple times successfully, and their account activity shows stability over a long period. But again, most users will never see the maximum limit, and that's okay, because the feature is designed for small financial gaps, not large borrowing needs. Another important point is that borrow is not available in every region and not on every version of Cash App. Sometimes updates roll out slowly and features appear gradually, so even if you meet the requirements, it might take time before you see it. If you ever do get access, the best approach is to treat it responsibly. Borrow only what you can comfortably repay, because while the amounts might seem small, missing repayment deadlines can affect your future access significantly. At the end of the day, Cash App Borrow is less about how much can I get right now, and more about how trustworthy does my account look over time. The system rewards consistency, responsibility, and regular usage. So when you hear people talking about $20 limits, $100 limits, or even $500 limits, what they're really talking about is different levels of trust that Cash App has assigned to their account based on behaviour. And if you don't have access yet, it doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. It usually just means your account hasn't built enough history yet. Over time, with normal and responsible usage, eligibility can change. So that's the real picture behind Cash App Borrow limits, how they work, why they vary so much, and why some people see higher numbers while others see none at all.